And I said, no, I need it. I really need it tonight.
He doesn't hold grudges. He holds receipts. Sharp, vivid memories that never fade. Mel Brooks remembers everyone who ever fumbled a line, ignored a note, or strutted onto his set thinking they were the star of the universe. And once your name's on that invisible list, it's permanent, sealed like a curse. For over 6 decades, Mel Brooks turned madness into masterpieces. From Blazing Saddles to Young Frankenstein, he redefined comedy by ruling it with one iron law: control. Behind every chaotic laugh was military-level timing, and above everything else, trust. And when someone broke that trust, Brooks didn't scream or throw tantrums. He just erased you from his world, like you never existed. The Producers, Spaceballs, History of the World. Brooks didn't just make movies, he engineered machines. Every actor was a cog in his wild, roaring comedy engine. If one cog squeaked too loud, he replaced it without blinking. No drama, no warning, just gone, paid up, written out, forgotten. But some actors, oh, they broke the rule. Some ignored it, others didn't even know it existed, and Mel remembered every single one. The ones who wasted his time, thought they were smarter than his script, or forgot they were just visitors in a world he built from scratch. He's worked with hundreds, maybe thousands of actors, but only 5 made the blacklist. And not for small mistakes either. These were the ones who clashed, froze, or vanished without a word. Here they are, the 5 actors Mel Brooks never forgave. Number 1, Frank Langella. Some actors lose roles. Langella lost Mel Brooks himself. On paper, he looked perfect. Brooks was crafting Dracula, dead and loving it, and Langella had already slayed the role on Broadway. Tall, magnetic, pure charisma. He was Dracula. But that's exactly what went wrong. Brooks wasn't hunting for a gothic prince. He wanted a goofball vampire who could make you laugh before biting your neck. Langella, though? He walked into rehearsals like he was performing Hamlet. From the first read-through, the tone went sideways. The vibe on set froze. Brooks, a man who ran his productions like circus ringmasters run lions, felt the rhythm crumble. Langella didn't react to jokes, didn't loosen up, didn't play. Every line came out like holy text, carved in stone, untouchable. He wasn't playing Dracula, Brooks later told a friend. He was auditioning for sainthood. That line says it all. Brooks tried everything: soft notes, playful hints, gentle redirects. But nothing cracked Langella's marble face. He'd nod politely, then go right back to being the world's most serious vampire. Behind the scenes, tension thickened like fog. Brooks thrived on chaos with purpose, but Langella brought gravity when what he needed was momentum. The energy clashed, the jokes died, and soon Brooks made a decision, one he'd never forget and never forgive. Scenes that should have popped like fireworks instead dropped flat, heavy with dramatic pauses that killed every punchline. The vibe turned strange. Even the cast, a crew of seasoned comics and sharp character actors, started second-guessing themselves. Whispers spread through the crew like smoke. Is this a comedy or an opera? Then came the moment that sealed Langella's fate. During a test read, Brooks tossed him a fresh line, pure Mel Brooks genius, a setup that started serious and ended in total slapstick chaos. But instead of laughing, Langella just blinked, took a long pause, and asked in a flat tone, "Do you want me to mock the text?" The room froze. Brooks stared at him for a long beat before snapping back, "No, I want you to survive it." That was it, the breaking point. By the end of that week, Langella was out. No drama, no headlines, just a quiet replacement. Leslie Nielsen, a completely different kind of Dracula. Nielsen could play it dead straight while the whole world crumbled around him, exactly what Brooks wanted. Not gravitas, not Shakespearean weight, but control over beautiful chaos. Nielsen nailed it. Langella, though, not so much. Officially, the switch was due to creative differences, but everyone on set knew the truth. Brooks wasn't going to wrestle a Shakespearean statue into slapstick. He needed someone who felt the rhythm of a joke, someone who understood that the funniest moments come just before the punchline lands. Langella didn't. He left quietly, no big statement, no bitterness in public. But Brooks? He never mentioned him again. When Dracula, dead and loving. It came up in interviews. Mel's only word for Nielsen was perfect. Langella's name vanished from Brooks' world like it never existed. There were only two types of actors in Mel's universe: the ones who elevated the madness and the ones who got swallowed by it. Langella showed up wearing a crown, but Brooks wasn't making royalty. He was making chaos, and you had to love the fall to survive it. Number 2. Gene Wilder. Some betrayals come from strangers, but Brooks's most painful one came from family. Gene Wilder wasn't just another collaborator. He was Mel's creative mirror, his comedy twin soul. Together, they didn't just make hits. They rewrote what funny could be. The producers, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, these weren't just comedies, they were revolutions. But after Young Frankenstein, something shifted. Wilder had written most of that script. His fingerprints were all over it. Brooks directed, fought tooth and nail to shoot it in black and white, and polished every frame until it sparkled. The final film? A masterpiece, instant classic. But behind the scenes, something cracked. Wilder had another story burning inside him, one he believed in just as fiercely. It was called The Adventure of Sherlock Holmes's Smarter Brother, and that script would test not just their partnership, but their friendship itself. He wrote it, directed it, and wanted Mel to produce it. Gene Wilder believed The Adventure of Sherlock Holmes's Smarter Brother was his next big leap, his time to step out from behind Mel's shadow. But when he brought it to Brooks, Mel didn't clap or cheer. He said no. Not because it wasn't funny, not because it wasn't smart, but because, in his words, Gene's not ready to direct. Brooks later admitted, he thought he was. I knew he wasn't. That hit Gene like a punch to the gut. He expected support, not rejection. What he got instead was distance, the kind that echoes louder than any argument. Wilder went ahead and made the movie without Mel. He cast his usual crew, Marty Feldman, Madeline Kahn, but something was missing. The rhythm was off, the magic fractured, and the laughter just didn't click. Years passed in silence. No interviews throwing shade, no gossip columns feeding drama. Just two men who once finished each other's jokes, now walking opposite directions. Brooks reportedly told a close friend, "It was like watching your brother pack up and leave home, except he left with your best joke." When they finally crossed paths again, years later, at an event neither of them planned to attend, it wasn't some Hollywood reunion moment. No tears, no dramatic speeches, just a handshake, a few quiet jokes, a small, gentle reconnection. But underneath that calm, something stayed cracked. They never made another movie together, not out of hate, but out of heartbreak. Brooks once said, "Gene was the only actor I ever trusted with my unfinished thoughts." He could hand him a half-written scene, no punchline, no rhythm, and Gene would finish it perfectly, like he'd already read Mel's mind. But after Smarter Brother, that trust was gone. Wilder had stepped outside the circle, and Mel Brooks, for all his chaos and kindness, never let anyone step out twice. Publicly, they remained warm and respectful. Privately, though, Mel's world was built on instinct, rhythm, and fierce loyalty. In that world, Gene Wilder became the one who broke the thread. Not out of malice, but in a way that left a mark that never healed. Because when someone knows you that deeply, they also know exactly where to pull. Number 3, Chevy Chase. Mel Brooks had a radar for energy. He could sense if someone belonged before a single line was read. And with Chevy Chase, that radar screamed, no, they never worked together, not once. And that wasn't coincidence. That was Mel's choice. In the 80s and early 90s, Chase's name kept popping up whenever studios tried to blend star power with Brooks' wild creativity. Chevy was a household name, box office gold, with a legendary deadpan delivery. But every time his name came up, Brooks shut it down instantly. Why? Because Chevy broke the golden rule of Mel's universe. Don't outshine the room, uplift it. Brooks had seen enough to know better. He'd caught the stories, the interviews, the tension on sets. Chase was brilliant, sure, fast, witty, razor sharp. But his edge cut both ways. He could make a room laugh, then leave it ice cold 5 seconds later. Brooks reportedly told a casting director, "He's not acting. He's just waiting for everyone else to stop talking so he can prove he's the smartest in the room." And that was all Mel needed to hear. Brooks didn't want the smartest man. He wanted the most generous. Someone who could land a punchline but still let the next actor steal the laugh. The closest they ever got was during casting for Spaceballs. Studios floated Chevy's name for Dark Helmet. He had the voice, the timing, the snark. On paper, it worked. But Mel barely entertained the idea. He wanted Rick Moranis. Why? "Rick knows when to step back," Brooks said. "Chevy only knows how to interrupt." That was the line that said it all. In Brooks' world, chemistry was sacred. Ego wasn't. Timing mattered more than credit. Privately, Mel described Chevy as someone who crashed comedy instead of dancing with it. He admired the skill, but hated the attitude, the constant smirk, the emotional distance, the sense that nothing ever really mattered. For Brooks, comedy was never about irony. It was about belief. You had to throw yourself into the absurd with total conviction. You had to mean it, even if it was insane. And that's why Chevy Chase never fit. Because no matter how funny the line, Mel knew Chevy didn't believe the joke. He believed himself. There was one meeting between them, short, stiff, forgettable. Nothing more than polite smiles and cold air. It ended with Mel Brooks offering a faint grin and saying, "Maybe in another universe." And that's exactly where Chevy Chase stayed, in another universe. Mel once hinted about it in an interview, carefully dancing around names. He said, "Some actors are so self-aware, they forget to be present. You can see them thinking about themselves when they're supposed to be living in the scene." The host, slyly, asked if he meant Chevy Chase. Mel just smiled and changed the subject. For Brooks, chemistry was everything. That invisible rhythm, the timing, the trust. You trust me, I'll trust you. That's how comedy lived and breathed. Chase didn't trust anyone. He turned silence into a weapon and sarcasm into a shield. Every joke felt like a competition, and in Mel's world, competition killed the laugh. Brooks wasn't chasing victories. He was chasing harmony, a cast that moved like music, not noise. Chevy didn't get blacklisted. He just got left out. Not because he wasn't funny, but because he didn't fit. In Mel's universe, misfits were welcome, but arrogance dressed up as confidence stayed outside the door. Number 4, Harvey Corman. On screen, Harvey Corman was pure gold. Brooks trusted him with some of the biggest laughs of his entire career, and Harvey delivered. Blazing Saddles, High Anxiety, History of the World. Part 1. Corman was unstoppable. He could hold a ridiculous face for the perfect beat, let the silence hang, then explode into laughter like a professional time bomb. But behind that magic, there was friction Mel rarely talked about. Corman came from the Carol Burnett show, where he was king, free to improvise, twist lines, and shape the room around him. Brooks' sets, though, were a different planet. Mel directed like a maestro. Every pause, every reaction, every breath had a rhythm. Step off beat, and the whole scene could fall apart. Corman, for all his brilliance, stepped off beat a lot. Their biggest clash came during High Anxiety. Brooks had cast him as Dr. Montague, the stiff, sinister head of the Psychoneurotic Institute for the very, very nervous. Corman wanted to rebuild the role from scratch. New quirks, new lines, total rewrites. Brooks shut it down instantly. "We already wrote the funny part. We just need you to do it." Corman didn't take it well. The tension started small. Little pauses, subtle resistance, tiny questions about blocking and line delivery. But soon, every take felt like a chess match. Brooks, usually fast and fiery with banter, started ending conversations early. Crew members later described it as passive warfare. No yelling, no drama, just quiet stubbornness on both sides. Brooks told a producer mid-shoot, "Harvey wants to be the director. I already have that job." By the final week, they were barely speaking. Notes were passed through assistants. Harvey kept to himself between takes, and that electric energy that once made Blazing Saddles bounce now felt heavy, almost rigid. Still, Corman's performance worked. Of course it did. He was too skilled to let the tension show. But Brooks never forgot what it cost to get there. After High Anxiety, Harvey's name quietly vanished from Mel's future projects, not out of revenge, but out of exhaustion. Brooks later summed it up perfectly. Some actors bring joy to set. Harvey brought brilliance, but it always came with resistance. There was no blow-up, no grudge, no public falling out, just a quiet understanding that they'd gone as far as they could together. Corman stayed proud of the work. He praised Mel publicly for years, and Brooks always returned the respect, never once denying Harvey's place in his greatest films. But they never worked side by side again. The rhythm had broken, and for Mel Brooks, rhythm was everything. He could handle wild personalities, big egos, full-on madness in costume. But when collaboration turned into competition, the joy vanished. The laughter faded. And when that happened, Mel didn't fight to win. He just walked away. Because for him, the moment making people laugh became harder than the joke itself. It was time to move on. Number 5, Jerry Lewis. Mel Brooks admired genius, but he had zero patience for arrogance. And when it came to Jerry Lewis, he saw both brilliance and ego tangled together in one loud, unstoppable force. And right there, Mel decided. It wasn't worth the trouble. For years, people lumped their names together. Two icons of comedy, two men who reinvented laughter in their own way. But behind the scenes, Brooks saw the storm brewing. He'd heard the stories, the on-set tantrums, the monologues that went too far. Mel respected Jerry's mind, that sharp experimental creativity, but he also saw what came with it: control, dominance, and chaos that didn't listen. To Brooks, that was the deal breaker. He believed comedy only worked when everyone believed together. And Jerry Lewis? He only believed in Jerry Lewis. Both Mel Brooks and Jerry Lewis were comedy architects. They didn't just tell jokes. They built entire worlds out of absurdity. Each wrote, directed, and starred in their own wild creations, bending the rules of humor until the audience couldn't stop laughing. For a time, Hollywood dreamed of bringing them together, a super collaboration between two mad geniuses. But it never happened. Behind closed doors, Mel called Lewis brilliant and exhausting. He respected the nutty professor, respected the innovation, the influence, the showmanship. But he didn't respect the man behind it. The spark that made Lewis shine was the same one that made him impossible to work with. The breaking point came in the mid-1980s, during casting talks for Life Stinks, Mel's sharp social satire about a billionaire forced to live on the streets. The studio wanted Jerry Lewis for a major supporting role. They said his name would bring prestige. Brooks didn't hesitate. He flat out refused. He told his producer, "I don't need someone who thinks he's funnier than the film." That one sentence said everything. Lewis had a reputation, rewriting scenes mid-shoot, overpowering directors, and turning every set into his personal stage. And Brooks? He didn't share control, not in the edit room, not on the soundstage, not anywhere. They met only once, through a mutual connection who thought maybe two legends could find common ground. Dinner, neutral territory. Brooks showed up curious, Lewis showed up late. Then he launched into a 15-minute monologue about the future of American comedy, barely even looking at Mel. Brooks sat there, listened politely, then left early. No argument, no scene, just quiet disappointment. Later, Mel summed it up perfectly. He didn't want to collaborate, he wanted applause. That was it. That dinner closed the door for good. Publicly, they stayed civil. Mel never trashed Lewis on camera. Lewis never mentioned Brooks much at all, but insiders knew. There was no feud, no heartbreak, just total rejection. Two comic titans who recognized each other's genius but couldn't stand on the same stage. When asked about actors or comedians he chose not to cast, Brooks once said, "If someone thinks they're the center of the universe, they can't function in mine. I already have a sun." That line hit like a lightning bolt. Because in Mel's world, comedy was a solar system. Every performer orbited the story. No one got to hijack the galaxy. That was the core of Brooks's style, balance in chaos. He built ensembles that danced between madness and structure. He let stars shine bright, but never brighter than the scene itself. Jerry Lewis couldn't do that. His ego wouldn't let him. And Mel Brooks wasn't about to gamble the harmony of his world for a man who didn't know how to share the map. Privately, Mel told friends that working with Jerry Lewis would have been a nuclear event, not because of the performance, but because of the fallout. Endless rewrites, power struggles, explosive tempers. Too loud, too much, too late. There was never a script, never a real offer, not even a follow-up call. Just two legends separated by philosophy, one who thrived on collaboration, and one who only heard his own applause. In the end, Jerry Lewis stayed where Mel wanted him, admired from a distance, respected for his genius, but banned from the inner circle. Because in Mel Brooks' world, even brilliance can't survive if it mistakes the set for a mirror. For all the names that fell away, the stories that ended in silence, one truth never changed. Mel Brooks never stopped working. Even as Hollywood shifted, as comedies turned slicker, meaner, and louder, Brooks held on to his own rhythm. He wasn't chasing trends. He was chasing laughter that felt alive. Every project was a controlled storm, a mix of timing, instinct, and pure nerve. In private, he admitted that directing comedy was a lonely job. "You make people laugh, then go home and wonder if you still can," he once said. That vulnerability was what set him apart. He built walls around his sets, not out of ego, but out of protection. For the art, for the madness, for the people who trusted him to steer the chaos. The blacklist, if you could call it that, wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. Brooks wasn't punishing the difficult ones. He was protecting the fragile balance that made the impossible happen. "You can't build a circus if everyone wants to be the ringmaster," he joked years later. And yet, for all his control, for all his insistence on order inside the storm, Mel Brooks never lost the spark that made him dangerous, the courage to make something ridiculous and believe in it completely. He could forgive a bad take, a weak joke, a creative failure. What he couldn't forgive was someone who stopped believing that the chaos mattered. Because to Mel Brooks, that's what comedy always was: belief. Not just in the punchline, but in the absurd miracle that people would show up, laugh, and leave feeling lighter than when they came in. Decades later, the stories still followed him. Former cast members whispered about the precision, the pressure, and the unspoken rule: never waste Mel's time. Assistants remembered the silence that came after a take went wrong, the way Brooks would lower his head, take a breath, and quietly rewrite the entire moment before anyone dared to speak. He wasn't cruel, he was exacting. The laughter had to sound effortless, even when it came from months of controlled chaos. Behind the camera, he could feel every offbeat breath, every misplaced syllable. He once said, "If a joke lands half a second too late, it's not a joke anymore. It's an autopsy." Those who earned his trust became legends. Those who didn't vanished quietly, not with bitterness, but with the understanding that Brooks' world wasn't built for everyone. It demanded faith in the absurd and respect for the rhythm. Over the years, he softened publicly, praising old collaborators, laughing at his own reputation, and admitting that some grudges were just old scars that never really hurt. But even in his 90s, when asked if he'd ever work with certain names again, he'd just grin and say, "Comedy's a dance. Some people step on your feet too many times." In the end, Mel Brooks' universe wasn't about enemies or favorites. It was about timing, about knowing when to step in, when to step out, and when to let the joke breathe. For everyone who crossed his path, that was the lesson. Make it count or don't make it at all. Even now, long after the cameras stopped rolling, the myth of Mel Brooks keeps growing. Younger comedians study his work like scripture, searching for the secret rhythm behind the madness. They quote his lines, steal his timing, and still can't quite capture the spark that made his chaos so perfectly controlled. In interviews, Brooks laughs when asked about legacy. He says he never planned one. "I just wanted to make people laugh loud enough that I could hear it over my own doubts," he once joked. But behind that punchline was truth. Every film, every set, every take was an act of faith, not just in himself, but in comedy as a kind of survival. The grudges, the blacklists, the vanished collaborations, they weren't ghosts haunting him. They were guardrails, reminders of what it took to keep the madness alive without letting it consume him. To Brooks, control wasn't about power. It was about protection. Protecting the laugh, the people, the fragile line between art and absurdity. And maybe that's why his stories still matter. Because in every tale of conflict, there's a lesson about belief, about the cost of holding on to chaos long enough to turn it into art. For Mel Brooks, the laughs were never just jokes. They were proof that the impossible could still work, if you cared enough to fight for it. When people talk about Mel Brooks now, they talk about the laughter first, the quotes, the scenes, the way he made the impossible look effortless. But the ones who worked closest to him talk about something else. The intensity, the stillness before every take, the feeling that you were standing inside a moment that could either explode into brilliance or fall apart completely. They say Mel could change a room with a glance. One eyebrow raised and the energy shifted. You could feel everyone holding their breath, waiting for him to decide whether it was time to laugh, to fix, or to start over. And when he did laugh, really laugh, the whole set would light up. It wasn't just approval, it was permission. Permission to be ridiculous, to take risks, to chase something that didn't make sense until it suddenly did. That's what people forget. For all his rules, all his control, Mel Brooks built his empire on chaos. But it was chaos with heart. He demanded discipline not to limit creativity, but to protect it. The chaos had to mean something, it had to connect. Even the ones who didn't last long in his orbit, the actors who clashed, the egos that cracked under pressure, carried a piece of him after they left. A rhythm, a lesson, a standard they couldn't forget. Because once you'd worked in Mel Brooks's world, every other kind of comedy felt too safe, too neat, too quiet. In the end, Mel Brooks didn't just shape comedy, he redefined its heartbeat. He proved that laughter could be sharp, dangerous, even defiant. His sets were laboratories for madness, his scripts blueprints for controlled explosions. Every film, every performance carried his fingerprints, timing that could slice through tension, chaos sculpted into precision, and a deep belief that nothing was off limits if it made people laugh. His grudges became myths, his perfectionism a legend. But behind all that noise was a man who never stopped chasing the next laugh, the next absurd miracle that might pull people closer together, even for a moment. When asked what kept him going, Brooks once said, "Fear. I'm afraid the world will forget how to laugh, and I can't let that happen." Maybe that's the real story. The actors, the clashes, the chaos, they were never the point. The point was the laughter itself, the kind that echoed past the cameras and out into the dark, where strangers were waiting to feel something again. Because to Mel Brooks, laughter wasn't an escape, it was survival. And that's why, even after the lights faded and the world around him changed, the rhythm he built still beats through every joke that dares to be fearless. His world didn't end when the film stopped. It just spread into every laugh loud enough to remind us that chaos, when handled right, is still the purest kind of joy. Mel Brooks never needed to shout. He didn't throw tantrums or storm out of rooms. When someone crossed the line, he simply closed the door. Quietly, completely, forever. No drama, no warning, just silence. the kind that ends careers. Some actors didn't make it because they weren't ready, sure. But these 5? Oh, they had the talent. What they didn't have was trust, rhythm, or the humility to match Brooks' madness. Once you lost Mel's trust, there was no comeback tour. No second shot, no emotional reunion. You were done. You weren't just out of the movie. You were erased from the conversation. The crew moved on, the calls stopped, and in Mel's universe, that meant one thing. Your spotlight had officially gone dark. So here's the question. Who do you think almost made this list? Or maybe should have? Drop your guesses in the comments because every name has a story, and some stories never got told. At least not until now. And hey, if you want early access to the next Hollywood blacklist, the untold rivalries, the lost roles, the quiet cancellations, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and join the channel for exclusive breakdowns only members get to see. Because in Mel Brooks' world, landing the part was never the prize. Keeping it was. Oh, there it is. 5 names Mel Brooks never forgave. 5 stories that prove in his world, comedy wasn't chaos, it was discipline with a punchline. And once you broke that rhythm, you were out. No drama, no warning, just silence. But now I want to hear from you. Who do you think almost made that list? Or maybe should have? Drop your wildest guesses down in the comments because you never know which Hollywood feud I'm breaking down next. And if you're loving these deep dives into the stories Hollywood tried to bury, don't just scroll away. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on that bell so you never miss a single drop. Members get early access, bonus breakdowns, and the real behind-the-scenes tea before anyone else. So join the crew. Because in Mel Brooks' world, the reward wasn't just getting cast. It was staying cast. And here on this channel, staying tuned is how you keep your spot.